In 1984, a 35-year-old French construction heir walked into a bankruptcy auction and bought a dying company for a single franc. 1 franc, less than the coins in your pocket. 40 years later, that same man would sit at the top of a 75-brand empire: Louis Vuitton, Dior, Tiffany, Moët, Hennessy, and become, for a time, the richest man on the entire planet. Richer than Musk, richer than Bezos. This is the story of Bernard Arnault, a man who never designed a handbag, never bottled a champagne, never sewed a single stitch. And yet he came to own the things that signal status to the entire world. They call him the wolf in cashmere because behind the soft-spoken billionaire in the perfect suit is one of the most ruthless operators in the history of business. The question this whole story answers is simple. How does a man who builds nothing end up owning everything? It starts with that 1 franc and a promise he had no intention of keeping. To understand Arnault, you have to go back to the beginning. And the beginning is not fashion, it's concrete. He was an engineer by training, running his family's construction company. Smart, precise, patient. But he didn't want to pour foundations for the rest of his life. He wanted something bigger, and in 1984, he found it hiding inside a corpse. A company called Boussac was collapsing. It was a sprawling French textile and retail empire, bankrupt, being broken up and sold off by the government. Most people saw a pile of dying businesses and walked away. Arnault saw one thing buried in the wreckage: a crown jewel the size of a legend. Christian Dior, the fashion house. He didn't want the textile mills or the failing stores. He wanted Dior, and he was willing to swallow the entire rotting company to get it. So he bought the whole thing for a symbolic 1 franc, agreeing to take on its mountain of debt. To win the deal, he made a promise. He told the French government he would protect the company, protect the jobs, keep the workers employed. That promise is how he got the keys, and the moment he had them, he broke it. Arnault laid off around 9,000 workers, roughly 85% of the workforce, and sold off nearly every piece of Boussac except Dior and 1 other brand. The French press, watching a soft-spoken young man dismantle an institution and put thousands out of work, gave him his first nickname. They called him the Terminator. He had walked in promising to save a company and walked out having gutted it for parts, keeping only the 1 piece worth a fortune. He didn't build Dior. He found it trapped inside something dying, bought the carcass cheap, and stripped away everything else. That instinct, that exact instinct, would define the next 40 years. With Dior in hand, Arnault set his eyes on a far bigger prize. In the late 1980s, 2 giants of French luxury had merged into a single company, Louis Vuitton and the champagne and cognac house Moët Hennessy, to form a new empire called LVMH. But behind the scenes, the merger was a civil war. The 2 sides hated each other, locked in a bitter power struggle for control. One of the leaders, Racamier, made a fateful decision. He needed an ally, an outsider with money who could help him win the boardroom fight. So he invited Bernard Arnault in. He opened the door himself, believing he'd found a friendly investor who would back him. He had no idea he'd just invited the wolf into the house, because Arnault didn't come to take sides. He came to take everything. Quietly, using a war chest backed by the drinks giant Guinness, he began buying up LVMH stock, more and more and more, until one day the man who invited him in realized the truth. Arnault now controlled the company. He turned on Racamier, seized command of LVMH, and pushed out the very man who had handed him the keys. The charming guest had taken the entire estate, and right there, the wolf in cashmere was born. The operator who smiles, shakes your hand, and walks away owning the thing you built. By the late 1990s, Arnault looked unstoppable. He had perfected a signature move, the silent creep. Instead of announcing a takeover, he would quietly buy small slices of a target company on the open market, accumulating a stake before anyone realized he was even at the table. By the time the target noticed, it was often too late. In 1999, he aimed that move at one of the most famous names in fashion, Gucci. He started buying 5%, then more. Climbing toward a third of the entire company, closing in on control, all while insisting it was merely a passive investment. But this time, the target fought back. Gucci's leadership saw the wolf coming, and they detonated a defense so aggressive, the press called it the bloodiest fight in fashion. Gucci flooded the market with new shares and handed a massive chunk to a rival French billionaire, François Pinault, diluting Arnault's stake and slamming the door in his face. Arnault lost. After a long, brutal battle, he was forced to walk away, beaten, and beaten publicly, by a rival who had simply outmaneuvered him. It's one of the few times in his career the wolf bled. But here's the thing about a predator who loses once. He doesn't get cautious, he gets careful, and the next time he went hunting, no one would see him coming at all. The next target was the most untouchable name in all of luxury. Hermès, the maker of the Birkin bag, a family-controlled house so exclusive that owning one of its purses can mean waiting years and spending tens of thousands of dollars. The Hermès family had no interest in selling, ever. Taking a company like that should have been impossible. So Arnault did something that had never quite been done at this scale. Working in total secrecy, he used complex financial instruments, equity swaps routed through banks, to build a hidden stake in Hermès without ever showing his hand. The rules that normally force an investor to declare when they're accumulating shares? He found his way around them. Slowly, invisibly, his position grew to more than 20% of the company. And then the Hermès family woke up one morning to discover that the wolf was already inside the walls, holding a fifth of their empire. And they never saw a single step of it happen. When confronted, Arnault's explanation was almost insulting in its calm. He suggested the company had essentially found itself owning the shares, as if a 20% secret stake in the most guarded house in fashion had simply materialized by accident. France's financial regulator didn't buy it. They investigated and they fined him. But a fine to a man building a fortune in the hundreds of billions is barely a parking ticket. The Hermès family had to fight for years, restructuring their entire ownership to lock him out for good. It was the most surgical, most cunning move he ever made. The wolf at the absolute peak of his powers. By now, Arnault didn't just want famous brands. He wanted American ones. And in 2019, he went after the bluest blood in American luxury, Tiffany, the jeweler in the little blue box. He agreed to buy it for more than $16 billion, one of the largest luxury deals in history. The handshake was done. And then the world changed. The pandemic hit, luxury sales cratered, and Arnault suddenly didn't want to pay his agreed price anymore. So he did what the wolf always does. He found the leverage. He moved to walk away from the deal. The two sides hurled lawsuits at each other, and the most expensive engagement in business turned into an open war. When the dust settled, Arnault got exactly what he wanted. He closed the deal, but for roughly $400 million less than he'd originally agreed to pay. Even when he buys, he finds a way to pay less. And that was the final piece. Today, Bernard Arnault sits atop an empire of around 75 brands: Louis Vuitton, Dior, Tiffany, Moët, Hennessy, Bulgari, Sephora, and dozens more. He turned LVMH into the first European company ever to be worth $500 billion. And at his peak, his personal fortune climbed past everyone, past Musk, past Bezos, making him the richest man on the entire planet. A man who never designed a dress, never cut a diamond, never poured a glass of champagne. So how does a man who builds nothing end up owning everything? Now you know. He buys the thing other people built, takes it for less than it's worth, removes anyone standing in his way, and does it all in a perfect suit, with a soft voice and a quiet smile. The construction engineer who bought a bankrupt company for 1 franc became the most powerful man in the history of luxury, the wolf in cashmere. And the world still can't decide whether to admire what he built or fear how he built it. If this is how one man came to own the things the whole world wants, wait until you see the next one. Subscribe, and we'll see you in the next story.